Jiu Jitsu was the first thing that I fell in love with, to be honest. When it comes to MMA, I started Jiu Jitsu when I was 15 and I was only about 50 kilo. I was pretty small and I was always on the bottom. And as you say, the amount of submissions you can get off the bottom surprised a lot of bigger people. Yes. Back in Liverpool again. Another remote episode for you of Chattin Pony with Paddy The Baddy. I have an absolute legend here. One of the biggest names in all of my sports history. Well, the biggest name in my sports history. Rener Gracie. I want you to obviously introduce yourself first and foremost, fella.
Awesome. Thanks, Paddy, for having me here. Hey, everyone. Rener Gracie. A member of the Gracie family, the originators of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and the Ultimate Fighting Championship, ultimately. So happy to be here, bro. Proud to see all you've accomplished in the sport and just what a tear you're on, man, especially with the flying triangles and all the jiu-jitsu. So I'm a fan and honored to be here to chat it up with you.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to have you on, lad. As you've just said, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for your family. So, like, I wouldn't be getting paid what I'm getting paid. I wouldn't be in the spotlight that I am if it wasn't for your family coming up with the Ultimate Fighting Championship and seeing what art is the best out of them all. And we proved back in, you proved back in the day that Jiu-Jitsu was the best. But what was it like being born into the Gracie family, obviously, because even before the UFC, there was all sorts of street fights and fights in dojos and just scraps everywhere.
Yeah. Well, people have been fighting since the beginning of time. I think that, in the Gracie family, right, for some of your viewers and your listeners who don't know, it goes back to the early 1900s in Brazil, where my great uncle Carlos and his brother, my grandfather Hélio Gracie, were introduced to Jiu Jitsu as young men there. The challenge was my grandfather was uniquely physically unfit, right? He was very frail, a very weak young man, and as a result was restricted from doing the Japanese Jiu Jitsu techniques that his older brothers were practicing and were capable of doing. And because he was so frail, his physique was so frail, when he finally did venture onto the mat and made his way in there as a teenager, he realized the techniques that were suitable for many of his brothers and their students were not suitable for him. So those adaptations to the original Japanese rendition of the art are what gave birth to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as we now know it and is being so widely practiced around the world. And people often ask me, well, Rener, what is really the big difference? And I think above everything else, right, because there were submissions, there were ground control, there was grappling, there were different, guard position. All of that existed before Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. But if you ask me what is really unique to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu compared to the Japanese kind of predecessor of the art, it's the acceptance that just because you're underneath someone doesn't mean the fight's over, right? You could be on the bottom. And my grandfather being so small, so frail his entire life, he was often just ragdolled to the bottom of the fight. So his mindset was, look, you might take me down, you might get on top of me, but this fight isn't over until you knock me out or choke me out or submit me in some fashion. So that right there gave birth to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, in my opinion, and is what makes it such a unique and amazing art today. It's what we love about it, right? Like you could be in a grapple with those 10 Marines that you submitted last week. You could be in a grapple with a guy much, much stronger than you. You end up on the bottom and you're like, yo, no problem. I'm on vacation down here. It's no big deal. So the acceptance that no matter where we are in the fight, we are comfortable and we are safe and we are winning. If you know Jiu-Jitsu, no matter where you land, it doesn't matter. You always have the upper hand, even when you're underneath the opponent. And we love that about Jiu-Jitsu. And growing up in a family where that was the methodology and that was the mindset that, that the Gracie family has then brought to America through my father in the early 1970s. And then he started teaching classes out of his garage, 1980s until 1989. And every person he met in the garage, Paddy, he would invite them for a free class. If he met you at the store, he'd be like, yo, have you ever tried Jiu-Jitsu? Come on over, try a free class. And then when they would sign up, he would say, listen, if you tell your friend about the garage training that's going on, I'll give you another free class and I'll give your friend a free class. So if you tell 10 friends, all 10 of your friends get free classes and you get 10 free classes. So through word of mouth, the Jiu-Jitsu spread here in America. And then oftentimes these people that heard about it in the garage were masters of other disciplines, right? They're masters of the karates and the kung fus and taekwondo. traditional arts that were so prominent here in the States in the early 1980s and mid 1980s. So oftentimes those masters of the other arts were like, well, I hear about the garage training, but I don't agree that it works. I don't agree with this Brazilian stuff. So we got to test it out. So my dad would very nicely say, hey, come on in. Let's actually have you in here and let's test it out. So these Gracie challenge matches, which really are the precursor to the UFC, right? These are the challenge matches between disciplines that got the entire world excited about, all right, when you put karate against taekwondo, what happens? When you put sumo against savate, what happens? And those challenge matches were successful in the 1980s, early 90s. And in 1993, my father and his partner, Art Davey, had the idea for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And really in the beginning, it was just a big infomercial for jiu-jitsu, right? It was like, get all these other arts so that we could show that if you know jiu-jitsu, you're taking everyone else to the bank. And it was successful in the sense that now every MMA fighter who steps in the ring has, you know, years and years and years of practice in jiu-jitsu before they even consider that professional career path as you've done.
Yeah, as you say, like with jiu-jitsu was the first thing that I fell in love with, to be honest. When it comes to MMA, jiu-jitsu was the first thing I fell in love with because, as you say about your grandfather, I started jiu-jitsu when I was 15 and I was only about 50 kilo. So I was pretty small and I was always on the bottom. So I got used to being on the bottom and I enjoyed it. And as you say, the amount of submissions you can get off the bottom surprised a lot of bigger people. And it just made it, for me, it's what got me to fall in love with MMA. So it's probably why I'm sitting here now talking to you, to be honest.
Interesting. Now, when you were growing up, why did you start doing jiu-jitsu? Did your parents recommend it? Were you like, Mom, I want to go learn that stuff? Or were you getting bullied at school and you just wanted to learn how to fight to protect yourself? What got you into your first jiu-jitsu class?
To be honest, it was watching a UFC. I didn't watch it. The first fight I ever watched was Diego Sanchez versus Clay Guida. And if you know it, they just run at each other, throwing uppercuts and hooks. And I was like, I need to try that. And I ended up watching a few more shows. I remember I watched Vitor Belfort, Rich Franklin live. And then I went to the gym. And as I say, I just went to the gym to... At first, I was obviously thinking, in the future, I could end up fighting. But I got on the mat and straight away, jiu-jitsu, I felt like I don't know, it just clicked. It clicked straight away for me, jiu-jitsu. Like, I really enjoyed it. And as I say, I was smaller. So I started doing some tournaments in the UK and I won a few tournaments. And then a couple of months later, I ended up fighting. And in my younger days, I relied on me jiu-jitsu, especially in the UK. It was, whenever I got people down and was on top of them or even on the bottom, our jiu-jitsu in our gym was better than most gyms in the UK. So I went like 9-0 amateur thanks to me jiu-jitsu.
I love that, man. Well, congratulations on how far you brought it and just how you're blending the arts together now so well. And the jiu-jitsu it's always a fun aspect to watch of your game.
Yeah, it's as you say, it's brilliant. I think the reason that I do mold it in so well is because I never just done jiu-jitsu when I was like, say, 4, 5, 6 and like done jiu-jitsu leading up, or I never just boxed. When I first started training, I walked into a mixed martial arts gym and I just started training everything straight away. I excelled in the jiu-jitsu straight away rather than everything else. I had to catch up when it comes to me striking and me wrestling, but like jiu-jitsu, I just loved it. You know what I mean? And then, like, obviously you say that night in 1993 when Hoyce, who just looked like any other man that had walked down the street, come in there and just made everyone look like babies. Made everyone look like your little brother.
Now, how old are you? How old were you when UFC 1 happened? How old were you?
I wasn't born.
I love it, dude. That's awesome.
I was born in January 1995, so I wasn't born. Hoyce was a multiple time UFC champion before I was even born.
That's wild, bro. Yeah, so UFC 1 was 1993, November 12th. I had just turned 10 years old on November 10th. So 2 days before UFC 1, I turned 10. Now, there was this massive dilemma in the household because my older brother, Hiron, who appears with me in a lot of the breakdowns, a lot of the videos, we're partners in the business here. So Hiron was 12, I was 10, and Hiron was permitted to go to UFC 1 as a 12-year-old for the first ever UFC. and I was like just turned 10, double digits. I was so pissed that I didn't get to go because I was like, no, you're too young, you're too small. So I'm at home, 10 years old, trying to celebrate my birthday, but pissed off that everyone's at the UFC. I'm at home with my mom, like watching on TV. And just when I thought I couldn't get any more upset about not getting to go to the UFC, I'm watching this thing live, and in between the matches, okay, because you remember UFC, the early UFCs weren't single fights. They were a tournament. So you had 8 guys fighting in the same night to determine a single winner. So Royce was one of 8. So he had to fight 3 times to be declared the tournament champion. So you would fight once, then you would come back, an hour later and fight again and then again. And these were no rules, no time limits, no gloves, right? So you could really do whatever you want, and there was no weight classes. So these guys were fighting a sumo wrestler versus a lightweight, like that was happening. So it was just absolute mayhem. Anyone out there who's listening right now or watching who hasn't seen UFC 1, you have to do it if you're a fan of the sport, if you haven't already. But anyways, I'm watching this live, and here's what's crazy. In between the fights, when the guys were like bleeding out, in the fights, they're getting cut open, their mouths kicked open, tooth falling out, and they're bleeding on the mat. My brother Hidon and our cousin Hawkson had rags, towels in their hands, and spray bottles at 12 years old. They were running into the octagon. They were spraying the blood, and they're wiping down the blood at 12 years old. I was so pissed. I was like, they got to be the Blood Boys on UFC 1. I'm over here so jealous. And then what's wild is that in the aftermath of UFC 1, several parents, people all over the country were watching this on pay-per-view. They were seeing the Blood Boys that were scraping down blood that were 12 years old doing this. And you got all kinds of calls from all over the country saying, this is crazy. Children should not be wiping blood for grown-ups in the ring. So that got shut down pretty quickly. That was the last time they got to be the Blood Boys. But I'm telling you, I was still jealous for many, many months after that I didn't get to go, and further, that I didn't get to be one of the original Blood Boys in UFC 1.
That's an interesting little fact for us there, though. Imagine this day and age, though, if that happened and 12-year-old boys ran into cleaner. There'd be some Karens on the go there, lad, wouldn't there? Even though the boys would be made up to do it, lad, there'd be some Karens on the hunt there, definitely.
Oh, yeah.
As we said, though, like the UFC, it couldn't exist without jiu-jitsu. It's just a fact. It wouldn't be here without jiu-jitsu.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's fair to say that jiu-jitsu gave birth to the UFC, because if it wasn't for jiu-jitsu's dominance prior to the UFC, there would have been no incentive to create a UFC. My father's incentive was absolutely clear. We create a television show where you put representatives of all the prominent styles in there, let them fight each other so that we can show the world what we already knew to be true, which is jiu-jitsu is the most effective art when you to consider a smaller person against a larger, more athletic person, right? You're going to be on the bottom. You're going to be getting pummeled from the bottom. For that smaller person, there is no second place art than jiu-jitsu to defend yourself against someone who outweighs you by 50, 100 pounds. Jiu-jitsu is the only way. So we wanted to show that, and it was effective. And then soon afterwards, what's interesting is that it was so effective that the U.S. Army contacted our family in the immediate months and years following UFC's 1, 2, 3, 4. U.S. Army, we're talking Rangers, we're talking Special Forces, military, law enforcement, all across the country. They saw what happened, and at that point, they became very interested in adding jiu-jitsu to their training regimens because they're always looking to have the most effective systems and self-defense protocol and defensive tactics. And jiu-jitsu just made that jump so quickly because it was proven in such an authentic engagement there in the octagon.
You have a name for that system, don't you? What's the name for the system that you've done with the military?
Yeah, so our program is called Gracie Survival Tactics, and this is GST for short. And GST is our law enforcement program, defensive tactics program for law enforcement professionals that really is designed to enable a law enforcement officer to interact with the public or a civilian in a way that is effective at keeping the officer safe while simultaneously keeping the subject safe in that encounter, right? Because isn't that, and I'm sure that's something you appreciate as well about jiu-jitsu, is if you have to get into an altercation, let's say outside of the octagon, you got into a street fight with some person for the stupidest reason that people get into street fights for. This guy's drunk, having a ball, throws something your way, hits you in the head, you go over and address the guy, now he wants to fight you. Your ability to take this person down and to tie him up into a pretzel and to talk to him, to actually negotiate and say, my friend, or as you say, lad, you're having a little too much to drink. I need you to chill out, and I'm going to let you go. But when I let you go, I'm going to need you to walk that way and get away from this gathering here because you had a little too much this evening. And you can negotiate from within the fight because of the nonviolent component. Now, the same way that's true for us as civilians, it's also true for law enforcement, where sadly, law enforcement officers are disastrously undertrained when it comes to going hands-on. I've been teaching law enforcement now for 25 years. I've been involved in this discussion of teaching law enforcement in America, and it's sad to say, and I try to expose the truth as much as possible in this regard, but the average police officer in America gets under 4 hours a year of training on how to grab a hold of someone and control them with their empty hands, right? Arrest and control tactics. Less than 4 hours a year is the average across America, which is unbelievable. And as a result of this, Paddy, what happens is a police officer gets into an interaction with the public, right? Man or woman, an officer could be a man or a woman. They get into an interaction, big or small. When they go hands-on, they are ineffective because they don't know how to do it technically. So what they end up doing is they panic, right? This is called an amygdala hijack. It's when the part of your brain that controls your conscious, rational decision-making, the prefrontal cortex, controls all those rational decisions, and really the throttle of aggression is controlled in your prefrontal cortex. When you have an amygdala hijack, it's when the amygdala takes over your brain and your lizard brain now. You are in survival mode, right? Anything goes. So when a police officer panics because they lose control of an interaction, of a physical arrest scenario, they panic, amygdala hijack, and now the level of force escalates so rapidly that they end up resorting to taser, baton, pepper spray, or in some cases lethal force much sooner than it would have been needed had the officer been equipped with some of the basic skills that you and I are so well trained in, of control, immobilization, some submissions. But the most basic control holds, if an officer has those, the level of force stays low, the liability for the agency goes down, injuries to civilians go down. So we have data now that supports all of this in terms of reducing injuries to officers and civilians when the officer is sufficiently trained in jiu-jitsu type techniques, control techniques. And for me, what I've been saying to law enforcement nationwide and worldwide is each officer needs to receive 1 hour of training per week in these skill sets. If you're not doing it at least 1 hour a week, you will not have the muscle memory to interact with the subject or a civilian safely when things aren't going according to plan. So to preserve your life and to preserve life of civilians whenever possible, 1 hour per officer per week. But I'll tell you, Paddy, it's been a massive uphill battle because there are politics at play here that really are resisting what is necessary when it comes to police officer training in America.
Well, as you say, the interesting point there, do you think they're resisting because of like funds? I think that's why they're resisting, because they don't want to invest money into this sort of thing. But as you say, money means nothing if it's going to save one life. You know what I mean? It really doesn't. Well,
here's the irony, Paddy. So for 25 years, since you asked, I'm going to go a little deeper down this hole, and I think listeners around the world will appreciate, because it does affect them, right?
Oh, this affects everyone. This affects everybody.
This affects everyone. So especially at today's day and age, and the current culture and relationship between civilians and law enforcement worldwide could not be any lower than it currently is. So I'm going to speak on this, and when you want me to shut up, you tell me to shut up. But in the meantime, we have to address this point, because you said it comes down to budget, comes down to money. Now, interestingly, I've identified this to be the truth. So when I've spoken to police chiefs over the last 20 plus years, and I say, why not? They say, Rener, training costs money. We have limited budgets, so we don't have the funds to give officers more than 4 hours a year of training. Okay, on the surface, it sounds like a legitimate argument. But what I've always believed anecdotally was that police officers who are better trained are going to sustain less injuries to themselves in uses of force. They're going to cause less injuries to civilians, and they're going to allow for fewer lawsuits against the agency. So I always felt that if you really dug into the numbers, that money would actually be saved by having better trained officers. That was my hypothesis. But again, because I'm not a police officer, I couldn't jump into an agency and force these new training mandates to prove my hypothesis. Well, as fate would have it, one of the agencies that we've been working with for 12 years in Marietta, Georgia, a police department where we've been saying to them, look, they need more training on a weekly basis. This has to be the case. One of these agencies had an incident take place in their city where officers who were poorly trained, because they only get 4 hours a year or less, they went in and they brutalized a person in a breakfast restaurant called IHOP. After this incident that went viral on YouTube and social media, the community crashed down on the agency. And at that point, the chief and the command staff at the agency had to ask the question, how are we going to scrutinize these police officers for poor performance when we never gave them the training that they need, the sufficient training to perform proficiently in a worst case use of force encounter? How can we blame them if they weren't equipped to begin with? So they tried something crazy, Paddy. They decided to send a group of police officers to a local civilian-owned Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school that was carefully vetted, and they created a partnership where those officers could train at the school at no cost to the officers. It was sponsored by the agency, and they were allowed to train weekly like regular Jiu Jitsu students, in with the rest of the students, like in with the civilians, just participating in Jiu Jitsu. So they did this for 18 months, and out of 145 officers at the agency, 95 officers opted in to this opportunity to get this free training at the agency. Now, after 18 months, they had all these officers that were training weekly, and they had data of those officers in their performance in law enforcement, and they were able to compare that 18 months of data to the 18 months before the initiation of the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu supplementary training program for these officers. And the results were astonishing to the world, but
not
for
to
me,
us.
they were exactly what I had been alluding to for the last 20 years. So listen to this, bro. You won't believe it. There was a 48% reduction in officer injuries during use of force encounter, meaning officers were less likely to get hurt when they went hands-on in the field, and as a result, the workman's comp claims, right, the liability for the agency of the officer injuries, workers' comp, the claims went down of injured officers, which saved the agency just under $70,000 in that 18-month period. So because cops weren't getting hurt, the agency saved money because they didn't have to pay for injured officers. The second data point was when an officer was trained in jiu-jitsu that interacted with the civilian was 53% less likely to be hospitalized. Now think about that. So if you're going to get arrested by a cop, you would think, the general public thinks that better trained police officers are going to be more injurious to the civilian. They're wrong. The poorly trained officers cause greater injuries by 53%. So you're more than twice as likely to be hospitalized if you get arrested by an untrained officer than if you get arrested by one of these 95 officers who had been training weekly jiu-jitsu. So think about the numbers associated with that. So now you have better trained officers, less injuries to the officers, less injuries to the public. And naturally, although we can't measure this, you can imagine, Paddy, how the reduction in injuries to civilians also results in a reduction in likelihood of lawsuits against the agency for excessive force allegations, because they're simply not hurting as many civilians. So now we have the data. Now, the irony of all of this is that the cost of training those officers over 18 months was $26,000. The overall saved income, saved finances rather, from the reduction in injuries to officers was $70,000. So the net profit for the agency for instituting better training was over $40,000. The city saved over $40,000 that they would have otherwise spent on injured officers. They saved that money because they trained their officers, which cost less than the money that they saved. So for the first time in history, there is data to point to the fact that a better trained officer group, a better trained police department actually saves the city money, even when we're talking about training 1 to 2 hours a week on a weekly basis so these officers can generate muscle memory and reflexes that are going to be needed in that high intensity situation. So this is the data I've been dreaming of for 20 years, Paddy, and it's changing everything in law enforcement. We're right at the center of it. Our program, GST, is the go-to program for most agencies in the country when it comes to jiu-jitsu. So it's just been a crazy ride. And this is all happening in the last 24 to 48 months. Like, it's been very recent that these changes are happening. So it couldn't be a worse relationship between public and the law enforcement community, but we couldn't be headed in a better direction when it comes to training officers in a way that will reduce injuries to civilians, the injuries that could have been avoided. That's the key for me. If the injury and the lethal force can be avoided, jiu-jitsu will help avoid it.
Yeah, where you said there about like other people not realising how much money it'd save and stuff. To me and you, because we do jiu-jitsu and we understand the martial art, we know full well how much that was going to save them. Know what I mean? We just know because, as you say, muscle memory. I know as soon as someone puts their hands on me from behind, I'm grabbing hold of a Kimura or I'm turning and I'm going into something else and I'm getting them down. Where, if, as you say, if a police officer doesn't know anything like that and someone grabs them from behind, they're going to pull the gun out and shoot because they don't know anything else, as you say. For me, I say fight or flight. You're going to fight or you're going to run, and it's one or the other. But as you say, you've got to invest money to make money, and that's what the police forces should think. Like, invest money in how good our officers are when it comes to arresting people in the job, rather than thinking, oh, no, we can't put that money in there because we want it for other things.
And you know what it is, Paddy, is that, interestingly, law enforcement officers have always been disastrously underprepared. The only difference now is that cameras are everywhere.
Yeah, social media.
So the accountability for these officers, there's 17 cameras recording every interaction between law enforcement and the public. So they have to be better trained. So this is the time where all the agencies who've been poorly performing forever, now they're having to button up and they have to, stand by. Now they're having to button up and to get their tactics right because the public expects more from them than what they're currently seeing. And ironically, when you tell the public all police officers in America should be trained in Gracie Survival tactics, should be trained in jiu-jitsu, the response is going to be, no way. Why would we want to teach dangerous techniques to officers? That's the general public's misguided perception. When the reality is, look at the Marietta, Georgia Police Department data. You want every officer in your city as trained as possible, because if you have a bad day, you have too much to drink, and you behave poorly in society, and you have to get arrested, the question is, do you want your police officer who's arresting you or your mom or your brother or your uncle, do you want that officer to be trained or untrained? That's the question everyone has to ask. And if the answer is you want them trained, well, then guess what? We got to start pushing for this type of overhaul in defensive tactics throughout the country. And that's literally what I spend most of my waking hours focusing on, is how to continuously break down these barriers and get more police departments understanding this. And of course, the politics and how all the finances work in, where ultimately they're saving money by getting their officers better trained in their agency.
Yeah, when, like, the way we're talking about it, some of the stuff that I see, like American police, like you just don't see that in the UK. You know what I mean? Like, just the way guns just get pulled out willy-nilly and get drawn on people, like it's just normal.
It's wild.
Blows my mind.
It's truly wild. It's truly wild to see. And listen, what we do see across both the UK and America, I'll tell you right now, is the disastrously underprepared officers when it comes to going hands-on, right? So this is not a America-only problem.
Oh, no, definitely not.
The other countries are
in the UK, lad, you see, like I've seen.
You're right, in terms of the gun coming out.
I've seen plenty of videos in the UK, lad, where it's obviously because there's no guns in the UK, you don't see lethal force, but in the UK, you'll just see like 6 officers attack one person. You know what I mean? And it's like, whoa, that they're getting, and as you said, they don't know jiu-jitsu. So they're pinning them down with like the knee over their kneecap, and they're injuring them with the knee on the neck and stuff like that, and putting the shoulder, like ragging the shoulder right up their arm, when they could literally just take the back and hold them there and say, calm down, as you said yourself. Or they could put them in a Kimura and say, just I'll put it on more if you're going to attack me, but if you're going to calm down, I won't. But they don't do that. They just go straight to force.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And listen, so that's it. For law enforcement, the future is jiu-jitsu. We're moving on it. It's happening right now. And beautifully, just for society, the future is jiu-jitsu. It's happening right now. Did you see the other day, Mark Zuckerberg posted that he's now like head over heels in love with jiu-jitsu? Isn't that awesome? One of the richest men to ever live. And this guy has all the resources in the world. And he was on Joe Rogan's podcast. And what did he say? He said, number one, this is the best sport. Number two, he said, I can't believe I didn't know about this sooner. Like, he is shocked that it was not brought into his life sooner. So the love that you have for it, the love that I have for it, the love that we spread to everyone that we talk to, it's like, yo, you got to do jiu-jitsu. It never reached Mark Zuckerberg until right now. And the reason I like to bring this up on a podcast where other people are listening is this. If the guy who has the more resources than most every person on the planet except for a small handful has fallen head over heels for jiu-jitsu, meaning this is his new passion that he's involving himself in and dedicating hours and hours to every day and every week. If this is true for Mark Zuckerberg, then jiu-jitsu is good enough for you. And who am I talking to? Every Paddy fan on the planet who's watching right now. Because Paddy, you have to understand, and you have to know this. You have fans who watch your fights, who cheer and get excited and jump up and scream at the television screen, and they watch you do a flying triangle. But when the show ends, in their heads, all they say to themselves is, Paddy's the man, but I never want to do what Paddy does. I never want to involve myself with the sport that Paddy is involved in. I'm just happy to cheer from the sidelines. So interestingly, like, one of my greatest roles in society and existences on this earth is that of getting people who are observers of jiu-jitsu from a distance to become practitioners of jiu-jitsu for themselves. That's like my greatest passion. So you'll see that we do these Gracie breakdowns, which are all over YouTube. And when there's a big blockbuster fight, you know, Conor was one of the big ones was Conor versus Khabib, right? When they fought and he choked him, and we did a breakdown and we put it on YouTube the next morning and we explain what happened in the fight. But we do it through a jiu-jitsu lens, Paddy, so that it's so easy for the average person to understand technically what happened. It's almost like we make a lesson out of the fight.
Yeah.
And we take away all the blood and the gore so that the student can go, wow, I don't want to do UFC, MMA. I don't want to do that thing. But I want to do what those guys are showing on YouTube because it's calm, technical, precise, cerebrally, mentally stimulating. It's all these beautiful things. It's technical. I want to do what those guys are showing. Even though I don't want to do MMA, I want to do that. So these Gracie breakdowns have generated hundreds of millions of views across platforms over the last 10 years since we started. And the number of people who started doing jiu-jitsu as a result of seeing one of those breakdowns and then going, wow, these guys are cool and I like the way they teach. I want to go find a school where I can learn. That right there is one of the biggest funnels from couches to training rooms, to couches to the dojo, in all of social media, and I think in the world, right? The only person probably who's solely bringing more people to jiu-jitsu than me and Hidon is probably Joe Rogan. He's a massive advocate, funneling people to jiu-jitsu all the time on his podcast, which I love. But me and Hidon are very dedicated to getting people on board, and to see that Mark Zuckerberg is now practicing, I'm just saying to all of your fans, like, yo, the time is now. Jiu-jitsu is for you. Now, some people go, oh, I'm too scared. I don't want to go to an MMA gym and get beat up. I don't want to be thrown to the wolves. So what we created, Paddy, for this reason, is a website called GracieUniversity.com, and we have all the lessons online in order. So lesson number 1 is the first thing you see. Then you see lesson 2, and lesson 3 builds on lessons 1 and 2. Lesson 4, lesson 5, and you just keep cycling through this linear curriculum. And we now have, I think, 360,000 members learning online in 196 countries. And all those people heard about that website through the Gracie breakdowns. So now what happens is they learn online, they see a few lessons, they fall in love with it. A lot of times they're training in their living room with their brother, their mom, their sister, their son, whoever, and they're practicing these techniques. And then they go, all right, now I want to go find a gym where I can train with other training partners. And then they find a school on the website, right? We have a whole list of locations, and then they embark on the journey at the school. But what we've done is we've really lowered the entry barrier for someone to go try jiu-jitsu online, watch the lessons in order, fall in love with it, and then if you love what you see, then go find a school where you can continue your practice and train in a group setting, which is beneficial for everyone if they have that opportunity. But my passion is getting people on the jiu-jitsu bandwagon, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come here and talk to you today, because I can imagine that out of your fans worldwide, let's say 100% of the Paddy fans, which there's hundreds of millions of, let's assume. Let's say 1% of those 100%, I assume that less than 1% have ever tried any martial art, let alone jiu-jitsu. So what about the 99%? How are we going to get them over the hump to try a class? GracieUniversity.com. Watch the first 3 lessons for free. And if it's not the best thing you've ever seen from an instructional perspective, then you get your money back.
You're onto a winner, aren't you? That's a good idea, though, getting people online so they understand it a little bit before they come in, because we have it in our gym, people just coming in fresh and thrashing about everywhere, and they end up not just hurting themselves, hurting other people. You know what I mean? That's obviously not what you want. But one thing I always do say to people, for me, is the health side of it, the health benefits of jiu-jitsu. A lot of people don't see that. They think, oh, he's going to put me in a lock, it's going to hurt. I'm like, no, you tap and then that's it, it's gone. You know what I mean? Then you're back to the chess game of trying to submit each other. Like, for me personally, whenever I get on the mat, no matter how bad my day's been mentally, once I'm on the mat, I'm on the mat. And that's it. I don't have any weight on my shoulders.
And let me ask you this, Paddy. Let me ask you this. In terms of the jiu-jitsu benefits, one is the physicality and the health benefits and the chess match, which you love. But what's interesting here, I've observed this in my own life, and so many of my students as well, and I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg is as well. Once you understand the principles of jiu-jitsu, the timing, the efficiency, the leverage, the connections, the strategy of jiu-jitsu on the mat, there is a massive life application to those very same principles. People who problem solve in jiu-jitsu on a daily basis in a dojo, and who have that experience every single day of going through those problems and overcoming with a number of principles of effectiveness, those people look at life through a different lens. People become better people through jiu-jitsu. Now, interestingly, this is so true that what I've done is I've just finished the first manuscript of my first book that I've ever written in my life, called The Art of Life, 32 Jiu-Jitsu Principles for Personal and Professional Success. So what I've done is I've taken my entire history of my life and analyzed all of my obstacles, all of my successes, all of my businesses that I've grown, jiu-jitsu and non, and personal challenges, personal obstacles, marriage, parenting, every aspect of my life. I deal with it through the lens of these 32 principles. And in the book, I explain how I apply these principles to everyday life. And I also explain how the reader can apply this combat principle to overcome obstacles in their personal, professional life, business, marriage, relationships, you name it. So we make all those connections for the reader. In addition to teaching the combat application, we also teach the life and business application. So I'm right now in the midst of finishing the first manuscript. It won't be out till the middle of next year, but I'm very excited about it because I'll tell you, for guys like Mark, right, Zuckerberg, I can imagine that the daily meditative stress relief of going and doing something physical, in addition to the principles that he's picking up in the combat practice, and then taking them back to his crazy life that we can only imagine, the number of challenges and obstacles he deals with on a daily basis, to be able to take those principles to achieve and to continue to achieve new levels of success. I'm sure it's one of the main benefits he's seeing, in addition to just the practice of a physical sport, which has its own amazing benefits.
So you touched on there, though, the 32 principles of jiu-jitsu. So we are, obviously you're not going to name all 32, but what's your top 5?
Yeah, so there's just a ton of them, right? So when we talk about the 32 principles, the initial kind of core macro principles, you're talking about connection, when to connect and how to connect with the opponent, detachment, deliberate disconnection, right? Then you have the distance principle. The right move from the wrong distance simply doesn't work, right? So the distance determines everything, whether it's striking or jiu-jitsu. Every technique has an optimal distance. Then you talk about the clock principle, right, where the right move at the wrong time is the wrong technique, and how we deliberately will disrupt the timing of our opponent's techniques in our favor. And then we talk about the pivot principle, how you might be in a certain position and you're trying a technique. Literally, all you need to do sometimes is change your angle relative to your opponent's arm, and you can double the leverage that you have over your opponent. So when you think the river principle, one of my favorites, right? So in jiu-jitsu, oftentimes we encounter roadblocks, we encounter obstacles, we encounter direct resistance. The river principle teaches that, like a river, when you encounter a rock, you don't fixate on the rock. You flow where the rock is not. So when you're in the octagon, Paddy, and you're strategizing a takedown and you go for it, and the person that you're trying to take down doesn't move or doesn't budge the way you expected, your fluidity in transitioning into that flying triangle or guillotine or whatever else it might be is the river principle. So what we've done is, even though these principles are ingrained in jiu-jitsu and every master, every black belt lives them every single day, what happens is we've actually codified them and named all 32, and we've published this as a instructional video course on GracieUniversity.com. It's called the 32 Principles of Jiu-Jitsu. So that teaches you the combat application, and we published this last year, and it was the #1 course we've ever released, ever, in the Gracie family as an instructional video series, was the 32 Principles of Jiu-Jitsu. But again, after I published that course, I got to thinking, I'm like, wow, these principles are not limited to combat application. I use these everywhere. And that's what sparked the idea for me to create and to write my first book, where I directly tie all of these principles to all of my major life challenges and milestones and victories. And it's been a remarkable process to make those connections. I can't wait to share it with the world, but it's amazing, right? Think about the river principle in a fight. Think about the pivot principle in a fight, and then think about the pivot principle in life, right? So a good example of the life application of the river principle, I'll demonstrate one. So I was at the park. With my son a couple of years ago. I'm going to back this camera up and open you up a little bit here. I was at the park with my son a couple of years ago, and I was wearing my sweatshirt, right? It was a cold morning, but the sun eventually came out, right? So I took off the hoodie that I was wearing, and as we were moving around, having fun at the park, I was chasing him. Finally, I took off the hoodie as I was getting hot, and I was about to tie it around my waist, right? You know how we do this one, Paddy? We've all done it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to carry you.
Take off your hoodie and you... Right. We're all guilty, right? We're all guilty of it. The fanny pack. And then you got this one, the European Yacht Club, you know what I'm saying? Or the country club, let's be honest.
We call
that the
Tory. That's what we call that, the Tory, look.
The Tory. There you go. You got the Tory. So we got the... And then you got this one, the wanna be cool guy, where you throw it over one shoulder. This is the option that I went with. When I bent over to pick my son up, the hoodie slipped off my shoulder and fell onto the wet grass. Paddy, I was so pissed, because in that moment, I realized that because I didn't want to tie the hoodie around my waist, I paid the price, and now my hoodie had wet water on it from the wet grass, a little bit of mud. It was dirty. So I picked it up and I went home, and we got home. My family was there. I locked myself in the office, right? I took my hoodie. In the office, I took my hoodie, I took paper clips, shoestrings, duct tape, and scissors. And I went in the office, I said, nobody bother me, and I came out 30 minutes later with the first functioning prototype of quick flip. Watch this. You flip the hoodie upside down. Look, inside goes your favorite hoodie. One pull, and out comes your fully functional backpack. And this, Paddy, you can put things inside the backpack. You can actually store things inside the backpack. And if you need to tighten it up, you simply grab these little clips, slide and bite, and now you can adjust it so it's nice and tight. And you can do whatever you have to do. And even if you have to fight somebody, it's not going to bounce around and hit you in the face. And now I'm going to drop this back down. Look at this. And the best part is you have space inside, like a lot of space. I can put another hoodie, a water bottle. There's a pocket for wallet, keys, and cell phone. And then when you're done, let's say you get cold again. Take out your stuff, right? Give it away. Give it to your son. I'll put my son's jacket inside, and when it gets cold again, I give him back his jacket. Now watch this, Paddy. I'm going in. Count to 3, Paddy.
1,
Too slow.
2,
I'm already
3.
back to the hoodie. We're already back to the full hoodie, dude. Look at this, bro. I invented quick flip.
That took you 30 minutes. You just went and just like, lad, you've got some brain, you know. That's next level. I was actually going to ask you about that, because you went on an episode of Shark Tank, didn't you? And in the UK, our version of Shark Tank is called Dragon's Den. So like it's the same principle. You go on and pitch your thing, yo. But my coach, Paul Rimmer, he said...
Bro, it was crazy.
He said, we need some quick flip next gen hoodies, lad. We need some of them. We need some over here. We're going to have to get me one of them. I need one of them, lad. Need one.
Hey, we'll make it happen, Paddy. No worries. And yes, I went on Shark Tank to promote this, Dragon's Den there in the UK. I went on Shark Tank. It was a riot. I had the best time. But the point I was trying to make, besides the fact that everyone should go to quickflipapparel.com and get their own there, I'll send you yours, Paddy. But the point I was trying to make is that I dropped my hoodie on the floor. That was the rock. I could have focused on the problem. Instead, I just focused on where the solution was. I went right home with my hoodie, and I flowed right past that obstacle. Now, the irony is I'm not a apparel guy. I don't have any history in apparel. I'm a jiu-jitsu teacher, right, who dropped his hoodie, and I created a solution that no one had previously invented. I invented this, I patented it, and now it's its own separate company, quickflipapparel.com. We sell hoodies all over the world. We've done hoodies for Universal Studios. We've done hoodies for Disneyland, Avengers hoodies that turn into Avengers backpacks. So this company has taken off on its own thanks to the river principle. So this is what I'm trying to explain, is that jiu-jitsu is life. And with the 32 principles and with this new book that I'm going to put out, I'm just so excited for other people to be able to read about and learn about these principles without ever having to step foot on the mat, but still developing this ability to look at life through the lens of a black belt jiu-jitsu master. That's my goal for everyone.
Well, the way it just took you 30 minutes, I'm sat here, I'm baffled. I'm just like, this guy's too smart for me. And my next question was going to be, didn't you ever want to be a fighter? But obviously not, you're too smart.
Listen, growing up in the Gracie family, fighting's in your DNA, and you don't really know of anything else. But what happened was, as I was coming of age, once I turned 19, 20, 21, 22, the UFC had already been 10 years on the air. So for me, it was really a question of, do I want to do what my uncles and my dad did and be a professional fighter and just go fight for the sake of fighting? Because remember, when the UFC started, it was all about proving jiu-jitsu against karate. 10 years later, nobody denies jiu-jitsu. Everyone is jiu-jitsu, right? So now if I'm fighting in the UFC, I'm fighting people who are of my same religion, right? Who believe in my religion. There's nothing to fight about because we agree that jiu-jitsu is at least a quintessential art in mixed martial arts, right? So once that agreement was there, the opportunity to fight style versus style was gone. And that was the opportunity that all my uncles had, my grandfather, my dad. They always had that opportunity to fight against other styles to demonstrate jiu-jitsu's effectiveness compared to other arts. Once that was gone, I had to weigh my options, and what my brother and I focused and chose to dedicate our lives to was the teaching of jiu-jitsu, because there was this massive demand globally, but there wasn't a lot of quality instructor certification protocols in place. So we created the instructor certification program. We created Gracie University Online Academy, and then people can now learn this stuff from anywhere in the world, and that's because we focused our efforts on, okay, how are we going to spread jiu-jitsu so that everyone has access to it? Not to mention, it's much better to make money teaching jiu-jitsu and selling hoodies around the world than getting punched in the face. I got to tell you that.
Perfect. You're not wrong. You'd rather not get punched in the face. I'm slightly strange. I enjoy getting punched in the face. I'm not normal. But you probably got punched enough growing up in the household. That must have been one competitive house, that. Everyone just got grappling 24/7. You would have walked in the kitchen and got rear naked choked while you weren't looking.
It was very tough. Yeah, my mom had five children in 10 years. So in that span, the number of kids beating each other up was crazy. You didn't know if the kid was screaming, crying, laughing, dying. There was so much noise in the house and everyone beating each other up all the time. I'm just happy I survived it. Here we are today. And now, my brother who beat me up for really 15 years straight since the day I was born, we're now, best friends and partners in the business. And I forgive him because I'll tell you what, all those beatings made me pretty tough. And now I can hold my own because of that. Yeah,
I'm with you on that one. I'm actually the youngest. I have an older brother and he's like 5 years older than me. And I think that's partly where I get my toughness from. Luke beating me up when I was younger. Just rib shots constantly. You couldn't cry.
Well, there you go. And remember, the Grandmaster Rener Gracie, my grandfather, was the youngest of the bunch as well. So anyways, you and him have a lot in common in that sense. And no wonder you came out so tough. So it all makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It all makes sense. As I say, when I first got on the mat, lad, jiu-jitsu was what I fell in love with. So, like, I have to thank your family first and foremost. Without you, I wouldn't be doing what I'd love to do. It's just ridiculous how far it's come and how big it's come. As you said, I wasn't even born when UFC 1 happened. And now it's literally one of the biggest sports in the world. And I'm not even 30 yet.
Well, yeah, the future is bright for you. And you're right. It's a very exciting time for MMA. It's even for me, because it's my business, it's even more exciting for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
I'm so stoked because I just see, like, you know, the world watches professional football and they sit on a couch and they yell at the screen and they don't want to do professional football. They just want to watch it, right? With MMA, it's my life purpose to make sure that every couch potato MMA fan at some point considers doing jiu-jitsu. To me, that's the biggest victory because of the health benefits, the life application of these principles, personal and professional, the camaraderie, the benefits of knowing how to defend yourself, right? If you get into a fight and you have the skills that you or I have in jiu-jitsu, our ability to control someone non-violently. And the irony of it, Paddy, is if you're out and about on the town and someone says something stupid or mouths off or says something to your girlfriend or wife or whatever, your ability to know that you could choke that person out in 15 seconds like that, the ability that we have physically allows us to be more compassionate and to be more humane and to be de-escalatory in our energy with that person. So when someone is being aggressive, our ability to go in there and de-escalate is actually higher because of our skills and our physical capabilities in jiu-jitsu. So a lot of times people will tell me, Rener, you know, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I don't want to learn jiu-jitsu because I'm not a fighter. I don't want to hurt anybody. The irony is the people who are the lovers are the ones who know jiu-jitsu because we can be more compassionate, more gentle with our use of force, and more de-escalatory with our language. When I talk to someone, I can talk it down because I don't have any lacking confidence in my abilities, where normally when you're at the club and you see someone puffing up and acting crazy, what do we know about that person? What are they missing on the inside? They're the ones who are hollow, right? It's the loud ones that you know are weak. The one you have to worry about is the quiet ninja in the corner like this, not saying a word, just watching the crowd. That's the guy you got to worry about, not the guy who's out here mouthing off. So the irony is learn how to fight so you never have to fight. And that's why we teach children, right? We have a program called Gracie Bully Proof, which is for children to learn how to defend themselves against bullies. And when a child learns physically how to defend themselves, they can then verbally de-escalate. But if a child doesn't have the physical confidence, they're not going to go to the bully, look him dead in the eye and say, hey, don't ever do that again. How can they do that if they're hollow, if there's nothing inside of them? They have to have the physical confidence, and then they can have the verbal and the de-escalatory confidence that we need to put an end to bullying. But the problem is a lot of parents simply don't know where to look. And again, GracieUniversity.com, go online. The entire Gracie Bully Proof program can be done from anywhere in the world between parent and child. So this is my passion, teaching, sharing, spreading. We have over 200 schools all over the world. And anyone out there who's even remotely interested in trying jiu-jitsu, if you're nervous about injury or embarrassment, start online with us. Watch the first 3 lessons for free, and then continue online if you want. But eventually, if you have the opportunity, make your way into a school. But by then, you'll have a lot of the basic techniques understood, so that jump is not going to be as catastrophic as it would be if you just join an MMA school with no knowledge, and then all of a sudden you're getting steamrolled by someone who's more advanced, and that's not pleasant, so I understand. But not all schools are run that way. If they know what they're doing, if the instructors are well certified and they have a good curriculum and a good beginner program, it's very safe. But you just have to know where to look. So start at GracieUniversity.com, and then if you don't find a school there, then reach out to us and we can recommend one in your area.
Yeah, well, that's the way you said about the kids. That's one thing I always say when people always ask me, what should I get my child into, this and that. And the first thing I always say is jiu-jitsu. If you want to make your child bully-proof, jiu-jitsu, because it's the best way to defend yourself. You don't have to hit anyone either. Like literally, it's controls. You just use your grip and control people. And once your child's confidence in that, as you say, they'd never bully anyone either because they know they can do that to someone anyway. They know they'd be able to tie people up, so they wouldn't become a bully in the first place, and we wouldn't have to get kids to be bully-proof then.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And listen, at the end of the day, the best solution to bullying is for kids to stop being bullies, right? That would be ideal if we could snap our fingers. But the reality is, because kids grow up in different households with different influences, and this bullying behavior is often learned from the parents or siblings in the household, you get kids that go to school with different education and different upbringings. You're always going to have kids who are going to harass and abuse others weaker and smaller and less socially positioned than they are to cause that type of harm to the younger ones. And if that's going to happen, as long as that's happening, then we have the right, not the obligation, but we have the right to empower our children against those threats. And to start with jiu-jitsu is absolutely the best way because of its nonviolence and because of the true, profound confidence that it provides the students that then allows them to go stand up for themselves or their friends, right? That's the other beauty, is you create little superheroes in society if a kid has jiu-jitsu and has the right kind of code of conduct and character. They can go out there and not just protect themselves, but they can protect other kids who aren't blessed with the same skill set.
Yeah, perfect. That's the best way. It really is exactly what you've just said. I couldn't have put it better myself, people. Perfect what Hannah's just said. But you know what? I'm just going to move on to the segment before we finish off anyway. I have a little segment called Ask Paddy where people are sending questions in for me and you for our answer. Some of them will be just for you. So let's see what people are asking. And yeah, this one's perfect for you, to be honest, Hannah. Jake V asks, I'm the first martial artist in my family, and as a father of young boys, I was wondering what influence your father's had on you in respects to martial arts. Obviously, we know more about Hannah's dad, but would love to hear from both of you. To be honest with me personally, like my dad wasn't into no martial arts. I just literally started going to my gym when I was 15. That was it. But a completely different ball game for you.
Yeah, and let me tell you this, Paddy. The secret benefit of jiu-jitsu in my family, from a father-son, parent-child relationship, obviously the confidence, the skills, the fact that I got this gift of confidence in jiu-jitsu as a young boy. Bro, going through high school with jiu-jitsu was like, man, a whole different ball game because I could handle anyone and I didn't have to hurt anyone. And the fact that I had that confidence was priceless. But between parent and child, there's a secret benefit when you make martial arts part of your family dynamic, which is the bond between parent and child. For so many kids, Paddy, the teenagers grow separate from their parents, right? Around 14, 15, 16, they grow like this. If the parent and the child both have a shared interest and passion for something like jiu-jitsu, then what happens is their trees grow side by side, at least as it pertains to martial arts. And there's always a way for them to bond, if not through practice, just general practice, the physical connection between two bodies as you're practicing jiu-jitsu is so intimate that for parents to have that with their children, I'll tell you right now that so many dads and moms come to me and say, look, because of jiu-jitsu, I have physical contact with my teenager who otherwise is playing video games or out with their friends and doesn't want to hug and kiss me at all. So for the parents to be physical with their children like that and to maintain that bond, you can't put a price tag on that. So for that reason alone, I advocate for parents and their children to get involved in the practice of martial arts. Any art would be great, but jiu-jitsu is the best.
I'm with you on that one. I definitely am. Next one, Junkie Joe asks, how much pressure does Hannah feel having the surname Gracie? And also, if he wasn't born into the BJJ life, what profession does he think he would have? He'd be an entrepreneur. If you've not heard him, hey, getting the quick flip out and that, he's on it.
So here's the deal. Regarding the pressure of the Gracie name, it's a very common question. And I'll tell you what, there was a lot of pressure, I'd say like up until 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. The pressure was greater then. Now that I have found my path, right, and I am in many ways the Gracie name, right, in many regards, I embody all of what that is. And now that I'm a perpetuator of everything good that is the Gracie family, it's no longer a pressure or a liability. It's an asset. It's an opportunity now. So now I'm like, wow, what a blessing to be born in this family. And look at how much opportunity I have. I mean, not the least of which is look at law enforcement, Gracie Survival tactics. The fact that I'm now at the center of the discussion surrounding jiu-jitsu's incorporation into American law enforcement is just such a massive honor. Like I'm right, a family that migrated from Brazil to America. I'm first generation American in my family, born here, and now I'm helping overhaul law enforcement defensive tactics. So to me, it's all opportunity now. It's no more pressure. It's just a massive blessing. And maybe my sons, right, who are now 7 and 4, will feel the pressure for the first 15, 20 years, and then they'll realize, wow, what an opportunity as well. So it's just a natural way of things. And if I wasn't involved in jiu-jitsu, the other question, I would be an inventor of amazing solutions to problems of the world, right? So quick flip is just one of my solutions. I have another invention right now that is highly confidential, and I have not announced it to anyone on any platform or anything, but my wife and I have invented the world's best travel pillow.
Oh, lad, I need one of them.
You're in an
them
airplane,
travel pillows are the worst things in the world. They're not comfortable. You can't sleep with them. How anyone pays $40 in an airport for one of them, I will never know, because they are the worst things on the planet.
Paddy the Baddy, listen to me. It's over. It's over. We have invented the solution. And think quick flip, what quick flip is to hoodies, right? The world's most efficient hoodie that carries itself when you're not wearing it. What quick flip is to hoodie, this solution that I cannot announce right now, it's super confidential until January, February next year. What quick flip is to hoodies, this solution is to travel pillows. It's over. The king of travel pillows has arrived, and it will change your life forever, Paddy. And when I send you your quick flip, I will send you your travel pillow inside the backpack, so you have both of those for your rest of your travels around the world. You are set. Never again will you suffer from the fanny pack. Never again will you suffer bobblehead.
Yeah. Lad, them 11-hour flights to California. Oh, lad. The missus, my fiance, just sleeps next to me, and I'm just sitting there looking at her like, how are you just sleep? How are you just sleep?
Miserable life on airplanes. Unless you got the private jet, you own the private jet, and you're laying flat, horizontal, which trust me, hey, Paddy, you're well on your way. Trust me, you'll be there. Just let me ride with you, and we can lay flat all day. We'll lay flat, and we'll go around the world together, okay? You're well on your way, champ. Keep doing what you're doing, and you'll be flat bed in the plane, no time. But in the meantime, while you're sitting vertical at 10 degrees of recline, while that's happening, bobblehead will plague your existence and your wife's existence. And I'm just telling you this right now. I got the solution. I think you're going to love it more than the quick flip. But, hey, that'll be determined once we get it out to you.
I can't wait to see that in January. But where you said earlier in that question, it actually brings us on to the next one. Pedro Ferreira asked, could we ever see a world where law enforcement have jiu-jitsu as part of their mandatory training? And you got a big part in making that happen.
Yeah, we are literally right in the center, Paddy, of the transition from a pre-jiu-jitsu era in law enforcement to a ubiquitous jiu-jitsu incorporation era in law enforcement. It's going to be everywhere. It's unbelievable. It's the fastest growing part of our business is law enforcement right now, today, as we speak. Just to give you a sense, for Gracie University and for all of our expansion efforts, law enforcement is the fastest growing area, and it's been remarkable, the journey. And there will come a time where we'll look back and we will laugh and cry about the realities that were law enforcement before jiu-jitsu, you really became prolific throughout the entire law enforcement industry.
Well, yeah, I've got two more questions I want to ask you, and I'll let you go. I won't take any more of your time. But from Tanto Brown Bear, is it tough for Rener to watch the UFC when guys are rolling around and have no idea what they're doing / being sloppy with their jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so people always ask, Rener, why didn't that guy do the triangle? Why didn't that guy do this choke? Why didn't he do the guillotine? And interestingly, I've been around long enough, Paddy, and you're the same, right? You have so much experience. You become so proficient at these skills, but you also know that there is nothing that substitutes the intensity of an ever-evolving, always changing, dynamic fighting environment that is unpredictable and crazy. So I never look at these fights and think to myself, what's wrong with that guy? The answer is they're fighting on the world's highest level and nothing but respect. I never fought professionally MMA, so who am I to criticize someone in there? They're risking their lives for their sport and for their paycheck and for the entertainment of the world. So there's never that direct, like, why don't they do, because it's not that simple. But that being said, every time there's a UFC fight where there's jiu-jitsu involved or a massive missed opportunity of jiu-jitsu, it doesn't mean I don't love the opportunity to turn that display into a lesson in a Gracie breakdown on YouTube that the viewers of the world could look at and get motivated or inspired by. So my criticism of jiu-jitsu in the UFC or used in the octagon is never that, they don't know what they're doing, because all the guys who are in there are world class. My criticism, or my analysis is a better term, of that use of jiu-jitsu is purely to get people who aren't doing jiu-jitsu excited about the prospect, because these guys in the cage, they know what they're doing. And if they miss the triangle, more often than not, it's because the triangle wasn't quite there. Very rarely at the level that you guys are at, is it a matter of he doesn't know what he's doing? No, the things are changing. It's so dynamic. So it would be disrespectful to insinuate anything otherwise.
So we are last one for you. This one, I like this question because it applies to everyone. Tan23 asks, well, it applies to me and you because we've competed before. What would it take to see Rener in a competition setting again?
Good question. So I competed when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, a lot of jiu-jitsu competition, and then a few challenge matches, right? I had guys who come in early days, and just after the UFC started, came in, and they still wanted to fight challenge matches, and I was like, great. So I got to fight some kickboxers, some boxers, some taekwondo guys. That was a blast. But besides that, so I stopped competing around 20 years old. I had an injury to my low back. I herniated a disc, so I had to rehab it for 10 months, and then that's when I created GracieUniversity.com. This idea for an online learning center where people could learn from anywhere in the world, because part of my thought, Paddy, was, man, I hurt my back at 19 years old, 20 years old. What if I get hurt again when I'm 25 or when I'm 30? What if my body doesn't work after I'm 30 years old? So I started going through this kind of down this rabbit hole and realizing that I needed to make my 20s fully dedicated to putting jiu-jitsu online in a linear format so that everything I've ever learned exists in this database so that people could learn it via video, streaming video from anywhere in the world on their own time from anywhere in the world. That became my sole obsession because I had this early injury and I was like, man, that's crazy. So once I started that focus, we've been teaching, we've been growing beautifully all over the world ever since. And, I train, I teach 4 or 5 times a week. I spar 3 nights a week, have a blast doing it with my training partners and my students there, but safe and sound, no injuries. I'm approaching 40 next year, and I'm like, listen, if I can train jiu-jitsu and stay healthy until I'm 85, 90 years old like my grandfather and do jiu-jitsu till the end, that's my victory, not a competition right now, because I'm not training for that.
Yeah, that's perfect way of putting it, to be honest. It really is, because you can just keep doing jiu-jitsu and keep doing jiu-jitsu. Like, my coach is the same. My coach doesn't compete, never really has done, but he just loves doing jiu-jitsu, and he's still in the gym training every day now in his mid-40s.
Love it. That's it. That's my retirement right there. Jiu-jitsu till the end and surf as often as I can. I love to surf. I love jiu-jitsu, and I love helping people, improve their lives on the mat and off the mat, and certifying instructors around the world through our instructor certification program that allows them to teach our programs, our jiu-jitsu, and open schools and quit their job that they hate to pursue their passion of jiu-jitsu and make it their profession. Like, that's one of my massive passions, is helping people turn their passion into their profession. And we're doing a lot of that right now through Gracie University. So it's really exciting.
Lad, surfing is hard. I just had to get that in before we finish. Surfing is hard.
Yeah, listen, so have you tried? Where have you surfed and how did it go?
San Diego. First time was a bit better. The second time I was just swallowing lots of seawater and being sick.
Now, did you have a coach or did you just go rent a board?
Yeah, I was just jumping on board. Know what I mean? Trying to do it.
No. That's like, doing what you're doing is the equivalent of basically some guys watching UFC fights, just watching the fights. Yeah. And then they say, we want to do what Paddy does. We want to do jiu-jitsu. Let's go in our garage with no instruction, online or in person. They go in the garage and they say, we saw Paddy do a flying triangle. Okay, cool. Let's start fighting right now. And let's see if jiu-jitsu teaches itself to us. Paddy, terrible approach San Diego was a disaster because you didn't have the right introduction to the art of surfing.
I had someone saying like, this is how you get up here, just like squat and stand up. I had that, but I didn't have like a surfing coach. No, I just give it a go.
No, the point is this. The point is this. Surfing will set your soul free. You want to love surfing. You're going to love it when you get, but you need the right coach. How much did having the right coach affect your jiu-jitsu journey? Right? It's everything. So what I'm telling you is the same way that's true for jiu-jitsu, it's true for surfing. The point is, imagine if you would have tried one jiu-jitsu class, got tumbled up in the water, and then quit after your first jiu-jitsu class. Does jiu-jitsu bad, or was the coach bad? Do you understand? So surfing is not bad. Your coach, your experience, your lesson was bad.
I do want to get good at surfing. I do want to try it again. It's just the last time I did, I just got crazy amounts of seawater in my lungs, and it was disgusting. But it's
so what's the only way forward? You have to find the best coach you can find to teach you. And I'm telling you right now, and here we are on Paddy The Baddy's podcast, Chattin Pony. Listen to me very carefully. All surfing coaches of the world. And I'll tell you, one of the best places to learn, Paddy, is Hawaii. If you go to Oahu and you guys go spend some time in Waikiki, there's some amazing surfing instructors out there who will push you in on the perfect waves that are like 30, 40, 50 seconds long. And the boards are so big that you're going to stand up and your soul will just be set on fire. Like you're just going to be the happiest guy in the world, bro. And they'll video record it. You'll post it on your Instagram. People will like it. They're going to be like, yo, Paddy's a surfer. And then you can you'll be stoked, bro. You'll be game over. So the point is, all the coaching instructors, surfing coaches of the world, I'm asking you guys right now, reach out to Paddy. Let's get him hooked up. Where should Paddy go to learn his basics? The Gracie combatives of surfing, where should he go to learn the basic fundamentals? That's what I want you guys to help us find out, and they'll reach out to you, and we'll get it done, bro. Let's do it.
Thank you very much. But again, thank you for taking time out your day, and I really appreciate it. But tell everyone where to find you. Obviously, you've mentioned a few websites, but tell everyone where to find you on your social medias and anything else that you want to spread the word on.
No, that's pretty much it, man. It's quickflipapparel.com for the hoodies. It's gracieuniversity.com for all our online programs, to find a school near you, or to learn more about instructor certification. If you want to open a school and do it the Gracie way, it's all there. And then in social media, it's Rener Gracie. It's spelled with an R, pronounced with an H. That's a Portuguese thing that I was blessed with. So check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Rener Gracie, Facebook. Gracie Breakdown on YouTube is really popular, and where we do all the post-fight analysis that really help people bridge the gap between MMA and the art of jiu-jitsu practice, the actual practice of the art, which for so many people is a distant concept. But I'm telling you, Paddy, we're working together here, and if we can get people to actually do jiu-jitsu from your fan base, to actually try a class, even online, watch a few lessons for free, that would be a massive service, because it will change their lives for the better. And then the book, expect that in the middle of next year. And then finally, the world's best travel pillow, the king of travel pillows, will be in January.
I'm
and
keeping
maybe
my
we can
eye
jump on and do another podcast when it's released.
I'm keeping my eye on that travel pillow, what's going to change my life. But again, thank you for your time, Rener. And obviously, thank you to your family, because without you, it changed my life, definitely changed a lot of people's lives. And you are only the second Gracie I've ever met. I only met Henzo once when I was in New York. So only the second ever Gracie I've ever met. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, bro. All the best to you, and congrats on all the success, and keep watching you climb your rise to the top. When you get that private plane, hit me up, and we can go flatbed anywhere in the world and go learn how to surf.
Definitely. The one reason I want a private jet is just for me dog. I want to bring me dog to the States. I want Lenny to see California.
Hey, it's a worthwhile mission, and you'll make it happen, bro. Keep climbing. All the best to you, Paddy. Thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. There we are, people. Another episode down. Chattin Pony with Paddy The Baddy. See you next week.